order. And just for those on screen, I would like us to introduce ourselves. I'm Mary Ann Meisner. I'm Mayor Pro Tem tonight.
I'm John O'Brien, the new city manager.
David Glade, council.
Denise Wheeler, council.
Molly King, council.
Corinne Duda, council.
Stu Spence, Parks and Recreation Director.
Kyle, Public Works.
Heather Reykjavich, the finance director.
Okay.
Robert Schroep, city manager through yesterday.
Emeritus.
Emeritus.
Yeah. So I guess, Kyle, are you going to take it on from here?
I can do a brief introduction, but to be honest, Doug and his team definitely has better cover on this stuff. So if you guys remember, we went through a process. We procured a consultant to go through the methodology on how we're going to calculate our SDCs. So FCS was the successful company. They've gone through and they've put together kind of the methodology of how we would calculate the SDCs. And I'll hand it over to Doug. Are you going to do the talking, or is it looks like it's John?
We're going to split it up, but I'll lead off if that's okay. And thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Yeah, I'm John Ghilarducci. I'm the principal on the project and have been working with Oregon System Development Charges for most of my career since 1991, and when the law became effective. So happy to be here. Well, virtually with you all and talk about SDCs and their potential for LeGrand. So I'm joined by Doug Gabbard and Luke Nelson. You'll hear from both of them as we go through the slides. Next slide, please. So the way we've set this up, we'll do some SDC basics at the beginning, starting with what is a system development charge, touch on the ORS and how closely we follow it, and then a overview of the calculation framework. And then Luke will walk through the analytical results for water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and parks. He did that analytical work, so he'll take us through the numbers, and then we'll be back to Doug for the last part of the presentation. So some things to remember about system development charges. These are the one-time fees paid at the time of development by new development. So, you know, regular ratepayers, your already developed properties don't pay system development charges. They're available as per statute for water, sewer, stormwater, parks, and transportation, and that's it. No other services. We can only spend system development charge revenue on capital. There's one small exception, which we'll touch on later. But so we calculate the charges based on the cost of infrastructure, capital, and you can only spend the money on capital projects. So they include an existing component that's called the reimbursement fee. That is a buy-in to infrastructure that's already been built. So if there's infrastructure in the ground that has capacity to serve some growth, then we can include part of that cost in the existing or reimbursement fee cost basis. And then the second component, in most cases, is a future-looking charge based on the cost of planned capital projects. And when we calculate that piece, and we'll show you on the graphic in a minute, but we're looking for just the capacity increasing portion of each project. That's what we can include in that future looking component. That's called the improvement fee. And then the last thing to remember is SDCs are intended to represent a share of the big stuff, system facilities, as opposed to local facilities. So not the water meter, a share of the reservoir. That's what you would include, a share of the transmission system. So there's a few key characteristics of SDCs. I mentioned that we follow the law very carefully. These are all the sections in the ORS pertaining to system development charges. The definitions are in that 223.299. And then the real meat of the SDC law is in that bolded section 223.304. That's what it basically tells us what we have to consider when calculating the reimbursement fee, what's includable, what's not, what our objective is. And then also same thing for the improvement fee, tells us again what we can include in that improvement fee calculation, what we have to exclude. There's language in there about credits. So if a developer is required by the city to build a project as a condition of development off of that SDC list, you have to give them credit for the oversizing portion of that cost. And that does happen. So that's something that needs to be in the ordinance, in the code. There is also notice requirements. So when we get, the report and the methodology has to be available for review, and you have to provide 90 days notice before the council can act on the system development charges, updating the methodology. So that's all in 304. 309 tells you what the ingredients are for the capital project list. And then 316 is kind of interesting too. If you have a website, you have to post your SDC methodology on the website so that it's available for people to review who want to. And then on this last slide, before we get into the results, this is sort of what the calculation typically looks like for that reimbursement fee. What we're trying to isolate is the cost of unused capacity in your existing systems. So for each system, has the city built enough infrastructure so there's room for growth? And if there is, we can include that cost. We divide it by the growth that it will serve, and that gives us our reimbursement fee. The improvement fee, that's the one that starts with a list of projects to be built. And we go through and identify the growth related portion of each project, and the total of those growth portions, again, divided by the growth that they will serve, gives us our improvement fee. And so together, they're intended to represent that share of infrastructure that's needed to serve that new customer. Some of it's already been built in the reimbursement fee, and some of it is yet to be built in the improvement fee. So those are some basics. Luke.
Good evening, Council. For each service type that SDCs are available for, I'm going to be walking through kind of the main three parts of the calculation John just went over. The improvement fee cost basis, reimbursement fee cost basis, and the growth in system demand. I'll also mention kind of a fourth bit of the SDC that was not included in that calculation slide, and that will be the compliance costs that are available to be included as part of that SDC. And then I'll touch on some of the major assumptions for each as well. So starting with water, looking at the project list, there was an average eligibility across all projects of 52%. That is mostly determined by the growth share and the full allocation of one well. And that gave us $3.8 million of improvement fee cost basis. Based on the water system plan, there wasn't any extra capacity to serve future growth. And there was compliance costs available of $232,713. That is going to be much higher than usual because we are forecasting out a very long way. And we usually forecast out as far as the system plan will allow us to based on the data incorporated, because that is also usually how far the project list is expected to serve.
I'm going to jump in real quick here and just returning to the top of this table, wanted to reinforce that we begin with a total project cost that would have come from a master plan, or in some cases, projects provided by staff. When we get that list, we look at each project individually and we ask, to what extent is this project allocable to growth? And behind the scenes, because we didn't want to do this to you 5 times, we have a spreadsheet available, and you will see it in the report, where each project has its own cost, has its own percentage of eligibility, leading to its eligible cost. And so what you see here in the 52% is kind of the weighted average eligibility once we total up all of those eligible costs. I'm sorry, Luke, please go ahead.
And then for water, we measured the growth in system demand in terms of meter capacity equivalents, or MCEs. And that is kind of the number of meters controlled for the size of the meter. So kind of the base meter is 3/4. Any meter that is higher than that would be 1 point some meters or higher. So we're projecting growth of 4,818 meter capacity equivalents. And dividing that total cost basis by that 4,818, we get a total SDC of $847 per meter capacity equivalent. On the next slide, we can see how that translates to the $847 for a 3/4 base meter. And then as the meter size increases, that SDC increases by the corresponding amount based on meter capacity equivalents. For sewer, it's going to look, yeah. Was there a question?
No, I coughed, sorry.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay, sewer, we're also measuring growth in meter capacity equivalents as well. There was a smaller project list associated, and more of it was based just on how much of the meters in 2035 will be new. So there's a much lower average eligibility for each project as well. So we come out with about $110,500 of improvement fee cost basis. Unlike with water, sewer had a little bit of indicated capacity within the existing system that allowed us to allocate $62,470 to the reimbursement fee. And compliance costs calculate out to 2035 for a total cost basis of 200,000. Over the course of current to 2035, we're estimating growth in MCEs of 355. And then dividing that 200,000 by the 355, we come out with a total SDC of $565 per meter capacity equivalent. So looking at the schedule for sewer, we see it looks very similar to what we just looked at with water, with $565 for the base meter size, and then it increasing correspondingly with meter capacity equivalent standards.
Can we pause here for just a second? I don't know that I fully wrapped my head around your average eligibility calculation. I know Doug, you spoke a little bit on that, but you know, so what else are you attributing the project cost to, if not growth? Where's the rest of that percentage going?
So we often use, in the absence of a specific engineering report that tells us that this project is X% of allocable to growth, which sometimes we get, but often we don't. We kind of use what we call kind of a 3-bucket method, where we look at projects, and most projects can be, where we don't have specific information, most projects can be sorted into one of 3 categories. If a project is in a new and growing area and its only purpose is to serve this newly growing area, then that project is likely to be 100% eligible. If a project is a replacement project and is not upsizing anyway, you're just replacing like for like, or is some kind of project that maybe doesn't increase capacity at all, then that's a 0% eligibility. That's not a capacity related project. In between those two extremes is a proportional allocation that we call the growth share. You'll sometimes hear us use that term. And what we're essentially doing is we're saying that this project, it does create some capacity, but it's really going to benefit both existing users and future users proportionately. And so to determine the eligibility percentage that we use for a project like that, we take the amount of growth that is expected during the forecast period, and we divide that by the total future customer base at the end of the forecast period. And that percentage is the growth share. And in this case, because this is a short forecast period at 2035, that's a low number. And that's why you end up with the 66% on average, because you have a lot of projects that are growth share. Now I'm characterizing these as a lot of projects growth share. Luke, is that an accurate statement?
Yes, for sewer, all of them were assigned the growth share.
Okay. Does that make sense?
That does help a little bit. And then just another question on the MCEs and how that's, the growth in MCEs, how that's calculated. So I mean, are you using population growth projections to create that number? I mean, to me, wouldn't it make sense to just say, hey, look, we know that X number of meter equivalents can fit within that 6% or whatever, and so we're just going to charge that. Yeah, how are you calculating the growth in MCEs?
So we start with data from the city about what you currently have in the ground. And that gives us one endpoint. We know your meter sizes, we know your meter counts. Now, from there, Luke, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so from there, with water, we were given in the system plan kind of peak day demand in millions of gallons per day, currently and in the future. And so we used those 3 data points to kind of work into how many MCEs that would translate to. That is the preferred way to do it. And for sewer, we would have done it that way if there had been like data in the system plan for sewer. Since that data was not available for sewer, though, we did use the population percentage growth in that system plan to just project forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for stormwater, we had 8% average eligibility for the project list for stormwater. That worked out to just under $600,000 in improvement fee. There was no excess capacity in the current system, which is pretty common for stormwater generally. Compliance costs of just over $82,000 for a total cost of $677,000. For stormwater, we have a different measure of growth where we took the buildable lands from the housing needs analysis and economic opportunities analysis reports for the city and calculated the amount of impervious square feet that is expected to be able to be built. And that works out to 45,324,616 square feet. That works out to just over a penny of improvement fee improvement fee per impervious square foot, and little bit less than a penny for compliance fee. And then to kind of work that out to a number that would mean something, we have a total SDC per 3,000 impervious square feet of $44.81. And we're kind of working under the assumption that that 3,000 is going to be somewhat close to what the typical single family residence or development would have. Moving into transportation. Transportation for project costs of $10 million had an average eligibility of about 18%. That led to an improvement fee cost basis of $1.8 million. Again, no excess capacity within the current system, and compliance costs of just under $55,000. For transportation, growth is measured in PM peak hour person trips. And so that, calculating forward the trips, we had 2,041 new person trips over the 20-year forecast. And that worked out to $909 per PM person trip. And kind of converting that to what it would be for a single family residence would be $1,347. And last, we have parks. There was a total project cost of over $1 million. Only 1% of that project cost was eligible for a total improvement fee of $15,035 and a reimbursement fee. But there was excess capacity within the park system of $93,000. And then looking at growth in residential equivalents, which is the number of the growth in residents and in employees controlled for how much we're assigning an employee to be like a resident. And that worked out to be, the assumption that we're using for that is an employee is about 0.1 residents.
So I'm gonna jump in here and address. This is definitely the odd duck as far as what you've been accustomed to seeing to this point, where you have a substantial improvement fee and usually zero or small reimbursement fee. So what and this 1% average eligibility, what's that all about? So with parks, we have a very rigorous level of service analysis that we do because parks is kind of the most discretionary of these 5 infrastructure systems. And we want to make sure all of this is an effort to make sure that development is not paying more than its fair share. So the way that we do that for parks is we look at your current inventory of parks and their actual physical capacity, number of acres of parks, number of miles of trails, that kind of thing. And then we look at your project list and we look at the extent to which the project list will expand those numbers, more acres, more miles. Well, your project list doesn't really do that. So you have some parks, you have some projects that will kind of create capacity in a less quantifiable way. And so we have to assign it that growth share bucket that we talked about earlier. Well, in your case, because we're looking at a 5-year forecast, that growth share is darn near nothing. And so that's why you end up being stuck with the 1%. Now, because you're not adding acres, when you do a level of service analysis, it looks like your level of service over the forecast period is going down, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because when your level of service is going down, that means that you mathematically have some available capacity in your existing system. In other words, your level of service now is higher than it will be in the future. And so part of that higher level of service is available for growth. And that is how you get a reimbursement fee that is much higher than the improvement fee. I just wanted to point that out because this one is not like the others in this sense. I'm sorry, Luke, please go ahead.
Okay, so that works out to us having a total cost basis of $108,000. Dividing by the 575 growth in residential equivalents, we get a total SDC per residential equivalent of $212. If you go ahead to the next slide, Doug, kind of working that through to single family and multifamily, we come up with $516 for single family and $333 for multifamily. And then in addition to that, because we're using residential equivalents and instead of just residents, the city has the option to charge non-residential development as well. So in the bottom half of this table, we have a kind of listing of a bunch of different types of non-residential development and the square foot per employee for each. And then we use that data to calculate the correct fee for each type of non-residential development.
Why the discrepancy between single and multifamily residential?
Yeah.
I would expect that to almost be in the other direction.
That's per dwelling unit. So if you have a duplex, it would be twice that.
So you're assuming that in a duplex is housing fewer people on average than a single family residence? Is that the assumption there?
I know.
Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, so the difference between the fees for single family and multifamily is based on the average occupancy of each dwelling unit type. So we typically see that single family residences per dwelling unit have a higher occupancy than each multifamily residential dwelling unit.
Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah.
It's true. There have been a couple of exceptions.
But this is based on actual data for the city of LeGrand. That difference.
So let's take these 5 SDCs that we've just calculated, and some of them are based on impervious square feet and trip ends and residential equivalents. So what we wanted to do to give you a sense of scale is to tell you what all of these mean in terms of a typical single family residence, and that's what you see here. So in the calculated SDC column, we show you the number as calculated. And then we translate that to a typical single family residence. Now, it just so happens that 1 meter capacity equivalent is the meter that you would have in a single family residence. And so these numbers are the same. But here we have 3,000 feet assumed of impervious square feet. We have the number of person trip ends for a single family residence, which is 1 and a fraction trip ends, and then multiply this residential equivalent number by the average occupancy of a single family residence, and you get the $500, which gives you a total SDC for a single family residence of just a little over $3,300. And to put that number into a little context, we have made some comparisons that show you kind of layer by layer where you would fall, and what you've got here is a very nice little starter SDC that isn't gonna alarm anyone, we don't think. You have some that are much higher, and if you look in the Portland metro area, they tend to be kind of all at this end of the scale where I am. But we just want to give you a little context that this SDC would be considered pretty small in Oregon, which is a reasonable place to start if you have not charged an SDC before. So this is a good place to be starting. It is allowed, and we would say we encourage it, that you index your SDCs each year. That using it's specifically addressed in statute as we describe here. We specifically recommend using the construction cost index as published by the Engineering News Record. We suggest Seattle is a good index to use because that is the closest one geographically. If you don't like Seattle, then the next best one is probably the 20 city overall index. But we suggest Seattle. Now, the thing about cost indexes is they usually go up, but they sometimes go down. And we would encourage you that even when it goes down, that you follow the index and also reduce your SDCs, because the point of indexing is not to gain more revenue. The point of indexing is to hedge your price risk. So you're trying to hedge your risk on the things that you have to buy with those SDCs, and then sticking with the index in whatever direction it goes is the way to do that. We want to
and that's the first time we've seen that decrease in many, many years, like maybe 2008 or 9.
Yeah,
just
the
just for
global
your
financial
background.
crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you should see. There are we work with some park districts that have more complicated index methodologies that will incorporate land values, and man, can that bounce around. But if you stick with the ENR, it won't be quite as volatile. We wanted to leave you this evening with a discussion of process. You're just starting out on SDCs. We want to help you start this thing right. And so let's talk through the steps from this point. And maybe you're far along on this, and maybe this will be just review. But for my own sake, I want to make sure that we've talked about all this. So we've provided you some information. What we've done here is not an official act in any way, because you're not taking action on this. In order to take action on this as a council, you need to go through a notice period, and that involves mailing out, and I do mean physically mailing out. That's what the law says, sorry. Mailing out notice to interested parties. Now, the law talks about a list. This is a list that you probably will not have because you haven't had SDCs. And so you will want to notify anyone who, just to protect yourselves, anyone who could be reasonably thought to care about charging an SDC. So home builders at the top of that list, real estate community, chamber of commerce, anyone you can think of who might care as a profession about SDCs, go ahead and mail them a notice. And we're going to help you with that. We're going to send you a template. It's a page. It's nothing complicated. And you will mail that out to the interested parties. And what that notice does, it gives notice of when the public hearing is. So you have to have scheduled the public hearing, and we put that on the notice, and that's what you're giving notice of. And so you send that out at least 90 days before the public hearing. During those 90 days, other things are happening. We are writing a report is one of those things. What's called the SDC methodology in the statute is the report that documents all these calculations in far more detail than you saw tonight. It will have all the project lists, for example, and how we arrived at the eligibility individually. So we're going to write that up, and we're going to make sure that you have that available for public inspection during the last 60 days of the 90-day notice period. And once that has been available for the 60 days, then you are clear for takeoff on the public hearing. But because this is your first SDC, there's a little more to be done. And that involves an ordinance. Now you're going to see bullet points on this list for both an ordinance and a resolution. So let me distinguish those for you now. The ordinance is in theory just a one-time piece of legislation that has all the policy information about your SDC program. And you know, because an ordinance, a lot of cities, you have to have a couple of readings before you enact it. But that's going to have all the policy language. If you haven't yet started work on that, the League of Oregon Cities does have a model SDC ordinance that's quite good. We would recommend that to you, and we would be happy to review anything you come up with, and we'll get those comments back to you in a timely way. What we're going to do, according to the scope of work that we have, is we're going to whip up the resolution. Now, the resolution is something that actually sets the SDCs until such time that you have a resolution that supersedes it. So in the ordinance will say something like the city council can adopt SDCs by resolution from time to time. And then the resolution is what you bring periodically whenever you're ready to change your SDCs. And it's the resolution that actually sets the numbers, the dollar figures. So we'll help you with that. Once all those things come together, you have the public hearing, you can enact the ordinance and adopt the resolution the same night that you want, but do enact the ordinance first, because it's the ordinance that gives you authority to go ahead and consider the resolution. And that is the process. And that is our presentation. So we're happy to take whatever questions you may have.
Who pays the SDC and at what point is it charged?
All right. So the developer or the builder pays the SDC, and it's usually collected at the same time you collect for a building permit. Now there are variations, and one of the things that one of the policy issues we go round and round about sometimes is the desire of the development community to delay payment of SDCs as long as possible, up to certificate of occupancy if they're allowed to. But most normally it's at the time of pulling building permits. John, is there any color that you want to give to that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's basically it. Yeah. Building permit is the most common timing.
The city can hold hostage the building permit until the payment of the SDC.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a checklist item, and they don't get the building permit unless they've paid the SDC.
You mentioned earlier that we have to send out notice to anybody that might reasonably have interest in SDCs, and you mentioned a few here. Do you have any other lists, more extensive lists of who might fall into those categories to help prompt us to make sure we're getting in the right direction?
Really, it's and I'm interested to hear what John has to say on this. Really, from the experiences we have, it's really the home builders that is really the key constituency. I'll say that if we're just sticking to the letter of the law, what you're required to do is send notice to people on your list. Well, you don't have a list yet. So the law requires you to start keeping a list of those who have opted in to get notice of any consideration of SDCs. Since this is your first SCC, I'm sure no one has made that request at this time. So legally, I'm not sure that you could get into trouble if you didn't do this, but I am encouraging you to be proactive anyway and get notice out to anyone you think might care about this. And John, I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, the best thing about doing that is it prevents the argument at the time that you're voting to adopt gee, we didn't have a chance to look at this. This is catching us by surprise. And so it protects you as the council, getting it out as much as you can. The one other thing I would add is if there are individual developers active in the city, I'd get the notice to them individually just to make sure that they know it's coming. But if they're active in any other cities in the region, they'll note that these are comparatively low, and I would project that you're not going to hear too much pushback, or at least I hope. I probably regret that I said that, but
Seems like an easy way to do that would just be to thumb through, building permits over the last few years and say, this is who's building.
good idea. Yeah.
Planning on building, that you know of. But he figured that out
Kyle
already.
knows.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
it was about 3,300. That was roughly the number we arrived at for single-family dwelling.
That is correct.
If I could interject, and I'll show some slides here in a minute. Ask Kyle to take a look and see for our current development charges for water and sewer, what does that look like and why are we doing this in the first place? And currently we do a water assessment and a sewer assessment. And if we were to use 602 South 12th Street, which is a 1-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family residence, the total that they would pay is $12,559.22
For the entire project,
just for water and sewer.
for the project.
And then they would also pay the current park system developed. The new SDC would replace this amount. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it would be a lot. So it would be a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So they are paying that now?
They are paying that now.
Okay.
That's what that property would pay for their actual.
I'd like it if you guys adopted this quickly.
Well,
It's making it more equitable is what
Yeah.
we're
well,
trying to.
the other thing is, and let me go ahead and put these up on the screen, and I don't know whether or not they'll be able to see this, but here is the one that I just talked about. And it has to do with what the frontage is, how we calculate it.
I remember that.
Yeah, right.
Now, so this is a really, really small house, big lot, 12 grand. Big house, small lot, $3,600.
So it's to the builder's benefit to do this.
This becomes more equitable because we're basing it on the demand on the system. We talk about, it was tens of thousands of dollars for water and sewer for commercial tire, which has not a lot of demand on the system. It's just the nature of the way that our fees are. And so by going to this sort of a system, it really does, I think, put us in a better position. And so here is a good illustration. Just for the single family residence, the water and sewer part, which was 3,000 to 12,000 in those two examples, would be about cut in half. We would be adding stormwater and transportation system development charges, which are super important to us, and the overall impact to development would be lesser than what they're currently experiencing.
Can you tell me what transportation entails? And does that go right into the street fund for, paving and resurfacing, that sort of thing?
No maintenance. It's all capital projects.
Right.
So all of these SDC's monies would have to go toward building capacity. So like, I'll give you an example of like Mulholland, where we have the new hotel and truck stop and an undersized road and a really poor turning out onto Island if you're coming from Starbucks. Those would be the funds that we would tap into to build a bigger right-of-way, upgrade it in intersections for better traffic flow, those sorts of things. But we could not use it for maintenance.
And these funds are, I imagine, specifically earmarked for their areas. Okay.
For each area, parks, we get so much marked for them,
Yeah, we do this currently, there's a separate one for the park system development charges.
So since we're on parks, can I just point out that and maybe you guys can weigh in on this just to give perspective. So the current parks fee is $525 for a family dwelling unit, which they're proposing would drop. However, as I understand it, there's some methodology based on commercial properties, which we currently don't collect on. So that would make up the difference or exceed it in some way. Is that right, Doug or John?
So what we have shown you is the ability to charge non-residential development if you make a finding that that non-residential development contributes to demand for the park system. So that finding is yours to make. If you decide that that is not the case, then you could just charge the residential STC and that's fine. So,
I
but
think I think I heard a different question.
I'm sorry, please go
Doug.
ahead.
The fee that we've calculated, the park SDC, is unrelated to your current park SDC. So as far as, I think you're basically saying, will it be revenue neutral with the existing fee? And we couldn't tell you without knowing how that fee was calculated, but this is based on your current planning information, and we know it's a defensible approach, if that addresses your question.
Yeah, both of those.
I don't think you're gonna be neutral on that.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, because that's
The-
assuming, roughly equivalent commercial development to residential, and I don't think LeGrand's seen that in a long time.
One thing, if I may, oh, sorry.
I think it will take a hit into this month.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you look at what the calculated SDC for them for a single-family residence is 460, you're going down from 520. Look at the number that Stu's collecting, but currently we don't collect for commercial. And if we decide that commercial has an impact or a use on our park system, Stu can start collecting on commercial. And when you look at those commercial rates, it's going to increase the side of revenue he doesn't have already. I mean, if you talk about Amazon alone having a, I don't know, 50, 60,000 square foot building, then that's a huge amount of revenue he doesn't collect today that he could under this new system.
What's an example of a commercial business that would be invested in parks?
I would think something like a hotel could be defensively said to use the parks because you're having people who stay here overnight and may go take the kids to the park or go to a baseball tournament. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Or swim meet, or.
Hotels and restaurants.
Yeah, it's what the employees do who reside out of the area that come in. Are they taking advantage of our park system? And my
Oh, yeah.
belief is they do. And so I think it's easy to come up with this finding, and I think it would help enhance our park system. And I think it would help offset some of the reductions that we would see from that single-family resident. And again, we're trying to come up with a much more equitable way of helping increase the infrastructure required for future growth and for future improvements. And so to me, it makes a great deal of sense, particularly when we look at the single-family residence as the illustration, where you have two very, very different demands, but one of them is paying 4 times what the other one is.
Right.
I'm sorry. So you would apply that same logic to like the Amazon distribution center?
Absolutely.
If I may jump in, provide a clarification. So this decision about whether to charge non-residential is entirely yours to make. However, I would encourage you, I strongly recommend that you make this on a category level. In other words, either you charge non-residential or you don't, rather than surgically, as applications come in, decide that we're going to charge this non-residential development, but not that non-residential development. That way lies monsters.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
It is interesting though that you get into the nuts and bolts and weeds when you start going down by type of commercial development
Yeah.
and varying charges like that, but it makes sense.
It's based on the number of employees by land use per 1,000 square feet. So there's a rational basis for the differences based on the number of people in those different types of businesses.
Can you speak to at all at other locations how they've applied it?
Exactly like this.
Okay.
And
Yeah, we could cite many of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is getting more common to charge non-residential development.
Yeah, you mentioned the sports team examples, which are great, but there's also people who jog at lunch or go take their lunch in a park. And so we try to capture that usage as well, or that impact.
So are you saying, just to John's point, are you saying this is uncommon in our area for now? That this might be a new thing for maybe regional developers in Eastern Oregon? Or is this an emerging trend, or is this something that's relatively common?
It
It's
is an
yeah,
emerging trend that is becoming relatively common throughout Oregon
Okay.
and
yeah,
really other in Washington too.
yeah.
Well, it makes sense too, because we have a lot of businesses that employ people that live in Cove, Union, Elgin.
Yeah. There's a demand on the system because of
Yeah,
that.
right.
Can we do, sorry, remind me, the non-parks ones, are those also available for commercial?
Yes.
Oh yes, heavens.
They're all, yeah, commercial are included in all those.
In fact, for transportation, we didn't give you all the gory detail here, but we're going to give you an enormous list of land uses, the vast majority of which are non-residential. If any of you have worked with the ITE manual, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, that is the gold standard of carving up land uses, and yeah, all these apply to non-residential.
I didn't remember the discussion happening outside of parks on commercial.
Yeah, it
So
goes
Yeah, I
back
don't
to
think we mentioned it specifically,
that's
but
where
yeah.
the size comes into play.
Gotcha, okay.
And frankly, most of the concern is what's the impact to housing gonna be? And so we can all relate to, what's it cost to build a house?
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I think the focus is primarily on that.
And how rapidly could this be enacted by
Implemented?
resolution?
Well, you have to
90
have-
days, or we're looking
We
at,
got
90 days is just for the notice for the public
Yeah,
meeting.
right.
So then you're gonna have at least 2 cycles of readings,
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
have
So
two
you're
readings of
looking
the
at-
ordinance.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have to put it
After
together
the
first.
beginning of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
And
When is your next building season?
Next year.
Spring.
Next year, yeah.
next summer.
So be no problem to have this wrapped up by then.
So quick question, because I just don't recall off the top of my head. It seems to me that part of what we had contemplated was kind of an open house, public meeting during that 90-day period before the formal public hearing to kind of present this to the community so that they could ask questions and understand it a little bit more than we typically see during the public hearing process. And I just don't remember if we had included that in your scope of work or not. Can you remind me?
I
I
think
am
Doug's
looking it
checking.
up now.
I think we're under budget, Kyle, so we could probably do that.
Because I think it would be very beneficial to have that public meeting
Oh, that's not good.
informational piece with the consultants kind of explaining, because First false.
No, I agree with what you're saying.
Sorry, Mr. City Manager.
But
My bad.
I think that's something that we would absolutely want to do, and I think the timing of that would be during that last 60 days when we do have that full report. So we really have everything set that's going to be the subject of the public hearing.
Responding to the question of what's in the scope, we do have an on-site presentation in the scope. So we do owe you that.
I thought we did. I just get old and forgetful at times.
Of course, this is a presentation too, but yeah, as John mentioned, I think we're under budget, so that should not be a problem.
Great.
Great. Any other questions? Anything else you guys would like to tell us? Warn us about?
Oh, I got one thing. Sorry. The concern about the water and wastewater, the sort of the charges that had been paid and that would be paid under this. Well, we're using master plans which are a few years old, and when the city does update their water and wastewater master plans, if that's on the horizon, you'll have a methodology that is legally defensible, and you can drop that new information into the methodology and update the charges with those fresh master plans. There'll be good information in those plans to do those updates.
So is it recommended to do that before
was it.
we have the public meeting and that, and have it all updated?
That would take a long,
No,
Okay,
because
no, just for future.
that's
Yeah.
the future, okay. well,
There's
I
Kyle.
wanna make sure.
updating the master plan is a month-long
Well, I thought
process.
it was, so
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering.
Is there anything in the statutes that requires us to revisit that formulation? Or can we pretty well say, hey, we're gonna control for inflation, we're gonna build in, bake that into the pie, and then as, future master plans and things, we can drop those numbers right in? It's not like we have to go back and redo this every 10 years. Okay.
Nope.
Very good.
So there is no statutory requirement to recalculate, and we suggest every 5 years or so is a good interval. Certainly, anytime you have a new master plan, that's an excellent opportunity to completely recalculate your SDCs. But then there's the whole opportunity of substituting projects, which you are free to do just by simple act of city council without any notice or public hearing. I'm gonna stop there just to say that you are beginning a journey, and there are many more questions that could have been asked that haven't been asked, and you didn't know to ask. And we're here for you as those questions arrive. At some point, we're going to be talking about credit policies and how to calculate those. We're gonna be talking about different ways to add substitute projects, add projects, and what do you do? Do you recalculate the SDC? These are all things that are going to come up, but they will come up in time.
Does an FAQ manual fit within the scope of what we're paying for?
No, but you're always welcome to put us under contract whenever you want.
Well, customer service is part of the contract. You could call us anytime with follow-up questions. Yeah. And the report will answer a lot.
Absolutely.
So I think the council, kind of from the beginning, has been in sync and has consensus that we do in fact want to move forward with this methodology. So, we'll talk offline in terms of exact timing of next steps and what we need to do. But I think it was a great presentation. Really appreciate all the work, and I think this is going to really be helpful for the community as a whole, particularly with the whole, what do you mean it's 3,000 or 13 or 20,000 for this when my neighbor I know, because he just did this that'll make Kyle's life a whole lot simpler, and John's too.
What do you mean $130,000? That was my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. There's Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
I look forward to it. Take care.